Hello, everybody. I bet you guys probably weren't expecting last time I did a shooting Stardust that the next one would also be a new take on an anime I love. Because yes, I love the original Cowboy Bebop. It was my first anime. It is my second favorite anime behind Gurren Lagann, which any of you guys who know me, being second to Gurren Lagann is still incredibly high praise. And I watch it once a year. The movie is one of my Halloween traditions. I tend to watch the series around New Year's. It is a show that I just adore. So, you can probably imagine how I felt when Netflix announced that they would be doing a live-action adaptation of it, because this was after their Death Note movie, which I haven't seen. I don't know if I'm going to see it, but everybody seemed to agree it was terrible, so there wasn't really too much reason to suspect that this was going to be all that good. But I will at least give them a little bit of credit. Out of all the anime that they've have their hands on either previously or we already know they're going to be doing it in the future, Death Note, Yu Yu Hakusho, One Piece, Cowboy Bebop was at least the series that would make the most sense in live action. It's sci-fi, but it's very grounded. It's the sort of thing you could convincingly do in live action. That didn't mean I had hope for it, of course, but it was at least a decision that seemed like it could have made sense. And especially, Cowboy Bebop is a very episodic show. Most episodes don't connect too much to one another. They're very much serialized, single adventures. So, it's totally fair to say, if you're going to make a new show, you could absolutely come up with new bounties for them to hunt, new adventures for them to go on. You could absolutely do something original. And then for a long time, you didn't really hear much about it. Every once in a while, you'd hear confirmation yeah, no, it's still happening. At some point, they announced the cast. John Cho as Spike was obviously the headlining one because he's the main character. And I think he's probably the most well-known actor in the series. At least he's the only one I even had a passing knowledge of who he was. I couldn't tell you anything else he's in, but it's at least a name I've heard before. And I'd say that cast was probably the first sign that something would be a little wrong. Some people would say, it's because the race changes. Now, Spike is clearly Asian, Jet is black. Definitely things like that, and so people would immediately say, that's just, they're doing their race changes because it's an Americanization. That's just how things go. No, I think the bigger one was the fact that they announced, here's the person who's going to be playing Spike, here's Jet, here's Faye, here's Vicious probably was in there. And I immediately noticed, where's Ed? How? I understand she wasn't introduced until the 9th episode, but you can't have Cowboy Bebop without Ed. What the hell is going on here? And then I mostly forgot about it. At some point they said, it'll be coming out in 2021. So okay. Let me know when you get closer. And it started to get closer. I wasn't really paying attention. Sometimes things would pop up. And then at some point on my homepage, I noticed that Netflix, they uploaded the intro to the show. I was like, okay, let me take a look at that. And, we at least had the positive, okay, it's Tank. They're at least trying to do a similar style to the original opening. But I noticed two things in there. First of all, they cheaped out and had a lot of the images in the opening be just filtered clips from the show instead of being all original footage. So that was just kind of cheap. And because of all of that footage, I was seeing characters that I recognized. There's someone I know, there's someone I know, there's someone I know. There's an exact moment I recognize. And that was the moment when I suddenly realized, they're not going to be doing anything original, are they? This is going to be a straight adaptation, and it's probably going to be worse. Then they were posting, Netflix really dug their own grave in two ways. First of all, they announced, in order to coincide with their new show, a month prior, they'd be adding the original to Netflix around the world. It's okay, why am I going to watch your new show when the original is there? It's nice you're giving me the option, you're giving me the good one, but why would I watch your new one now? And when the official Twitter account was posting comparison shots, here is a shot from the anime, and here is an exact recreation of the shot from our new show. And you see Okay, first of all, you shouldn't be doing something so close that you can have exact comparisons. You should be doing something original. And second, the exact comparisons looked like shit. I'm not a cinematographer. I can't really speak for any of this. I don't know any of the technical stuffs, but the one thing I can say is the first shot I saw, like here's Spike, Jet, and Faye in a room on the Bebop is a promotional image. I looked at it and I'm like, it's a YouTube fan film. When's the actual commercial product? And yeah, that did not go away as I was watching the show. So the show released last week at the time of recording this, November 19th, I believe. That sounds right. I immediately started watching it, and it took me over a week to get through it because it was just soul-sucking, man. Like, I just watched an episode, and I was like, I have to, because I knew I'd be making this video, I had to work up the energy to watch another episode, because I'm like, I have to. I'm going to make a video on this, but, I just really don't want to. And it started there, and it didn't go away. It just stuck with that for all 10 episodes. Now, part of that is because they do the normal thing, I guess, for streaming services, because, I don't know, American audiences like it or whatever. Each episode's at least 45 minutes long. Oh my God, damn it. Just give me a short, digestible episode so I can go do something else with my life. It's only 10 episodes, but you take how long each episode is, like at least 45 minutes. There's a couple that are close to an hour. And it's like, okay, you take the total running time of the show. It's probably close to the original. So I could be spending my time doing that instead, but now I just have to watch this. So I think it's fair to say I didn't like the show. No surprise there, really, but I think we have to go a little bit deeper than this. I knew I was going to be making a video. I took notes. I got several pages of notes here, but the notes are very much episode by episode. We can get into that later. Let's start with a from the top rundown. I already said it looks like shit. That's really the first thing you have to notice, because it's a live action show. You want it to look better than animation, and that's a high bar. You know, I love 2D animation. But no, they couldn't do that. Now, I will say, it's not always bad. I don't know if I was just getting acclimated to it or if it was just some weird issues, but later on as I'm watching it, that fan film air it had about it did start to go away, and as I'm watching later episodes, I'm feeling like, yeah, no, this just looks like a normal live action thing. I can buy this. And then, as I'm thinking, oh, maybe it got better. I don't know. There would just be one shot in there that I'm like, why did that one shot look so bad? I don't even know who to blame. I don't want to say it's the director, because there's some at least shot ideas that I'm like, okay, I see the idea here. That's not a bad shot idea you have going on here. So is it the cinematographer, the DP? I don't know who the hell the problem is, but they clearly did not have the skills, the equipment, the editing team, whatever the hell the problem was. It did not come out looking good, even if there was at least an idea there. Second, the episodes themselves, the stories they are telling, the fact that I could immediately identify all of them, all of this stuff I'm seeing in the intro, and even some of the characters I didn't immediately recognize. Now, once I watched the show, I'm like, okay, nope, that's exactly someone I know. There's not too much original here. Every single episode is I'm scrolling through it before I watch it just to check all the descriptions, which isn't something I normally do. I guess I just want to see what was there. Every time I'm reading this 1 or 2 sentence description, I'm like, oh, that's that episode. That's that episode. Oh, that one's first episode, I'm like, okay, that's Asteroid Blues, and then there's Stray Dog Strut. Oh, there's My Funny Valentine. I just recognize all of this stuff. And that's the problem, because if you're going to be telling the exact same stories, why the hell am I watching it? If I want to see the crew of the Bebop do this exact thing, it already exists. You didn't have to make a new show about it. Now, to be fair, it doesn't always do the exact same thing. There are from a high level, it's the same. Hey, here's here's Dr. Londas. He is starting a religion for people to abandon their physical bodies. No one can find him. So yes, that's exactly the same as Brain Scratch. But the way the episode progresses, what happens in it, is different from the original. So I can't say it's not a shot-for-shot remake of the original anime. The fact that there are different episode lengths means that it can't be. But a lot of the changes don't work. And that's really the bigger thing. Because now you're not just saying, if I'm going to be watching the same thing, why would I bother switching over to something new? Now it's, why would I watch the same thing but worse? At the very least, if these were new stories, even if you did it bad, I could at least say, well, I'm watching something new. There's at least value to this. And that, I feel like that's the biggest thing you can say about a show like this. Like, I've seen bad anime adaptations before, but they at least usually do something different. I can at least say there is value in watching it. You're seeing something new. It gives you a new perspective. It's something to make you feel like you didn't waste your time. Like, probably my best example is Dragon Ball Evolution. I know it's a weird one because that is a reviled movie. And yes, it is a bad movie. I can't deny that. But it is just so different from the original. It gets everything wrong that it is absolutely worth watching. That movie's hilarious. And it definitely gives you something you wouldn't see if you just watched classic Dragon Ball. I can tell you that. Compared to something like The Last Airbender movie, that's also a bad adaptation, but it's trying to do... Actually, now that I think about it, Last Airbender and Netflix Cowboy Bebop are a little bit more alike than I thought, because they're both bad adaptations that tell the same story, but worse. And they're brought down by the way they portray their characters, which are off. Even at a really low bar, I could say if you're telling the same stories but worse, at the very least I'm seeing characters I love again. That's at least a nice thing to see. If the characters were all that recognizable, they are pretty damn different. So we'll go down the list of at least the major characters. I'm not going to waste my time talking about every single one, but the major characters at the very least, starting off with Spike. Now, I can't get too much into the casting of all of them, just because I probably should have brought up IMDb before I started this, so I could at least tell you their names. But it's not like I know any of them. I couldn't tell you, like, oh, this person would have been a better choice. Like, whatever. I'll take what I can give. And you know what? Most of them, I'll say, if it was better written, if the characters were more like their original ones, most of these casting choices would have been okay. I wouldn't have had too much of a problem with it. But there are still certain things about it that do have some issues. John Cho is Spike. He looks too old. Spike is supposed to, obviously we don't know his real age. He's kind of a mysterious guy all around. We don't know how old he actually is, but I always figured he was somewhere in his 20s, probably mid to late 20s. He's like, I don't know how old John Cho is, but he looks like he's in like his 40s or something, maybe late 30s, like 10 years older than he should be. And you can just tell, he looks older. It's just kind of weird. And, sometimes certain elements just don't translate from animation to live action all that well. He has the exact outfit, but there's something about it that just looks wrong. It looks kind of puffy. It looks too clean. It feels like, you can do that outfit. It's not a super outlandish outfit, but make it look a little more like him. Spike's hair was always originally kind of weird. It still looks weird in live action. I'll at least give him credit that they did at least settle on a hair color. He's like, yeah, he's got black hair. We're just sticking to that. Because honestly, in the original show, I can't tell you, is Spike supposed to have green hair? Or is that just a lighting thing? I honestly have no idea. So I'll give him credit to that. And then, I don't remember what episode it was in, but there was one shot where it's just from the back, it's a silhouette. I'm looking at it, I'm like, wow, that actually, from a silhouette, that really does look like Spike. But as soon as you actually start to see the details, something just looks wrong. And and then there's like his movements in action sequences. Now, I don't watch too much live action stuff. I'm a big fan of live action hand-to-hand combat. I think if it's done well, it's very impressive to look at. And by live action standards, the fight scenes in this show really are not too bad. The problems are, one, there's not that much hand-to-hand fighting. A lot of it is just guns, which does take away from one of Spike's defining characteristics, his martial arts skills, as demonstrated in Waltz for Venus. That was a big thing about that episode, is demonstrating that. And I feel like that's worth pointing out because Waltz for Venus had made it very clear his fighting style was Bruce Lee inspired. Move like water, very quick, fluid, hard movements. Live action doesn't really carry that across. Animation can get away with making Spike very lanky, very long legs. It means that he can move quickly. His kicks have that right amount of impact to them. In live action, it just comes across looking a lot more stiff. And I don't know if that's something that could be done better or if that's just a limitation of live action. But basically, it just doesn't look right. And that's really all I can say. It's not a bad attempt. I'll give him that. But it doesn't look right. So after Spike, we've got the next original member of the Bebop, Jet Black, who is black now. That's definitely one of the more evident changes with the casting. Honestly, it never really bothered me that much because Jet was voiced by a black man in the English dub, so the voice is fine. I associate that sort of voice with the character. And he honestly doesn't look too bad. They managed to capture his look without it looking that crazy. His outfit looks a little weird, and when you really think about it, the fact that his beard splays off to the sides is unusual, but honestly, you don't tend to notice it too much. And if you can just look past the race, yeah, it's Jet. I can see that. It does make the fact that his name is Jet Black a little on the nose. I was actually wondering, are they going to change his last name? But no, a little weird. And it does sort of undermine his nickname of the Black Dog, because they call him the Black Dog, but they never explain why. So I'm like, okay, is it just because he's black? They don't even include that explanation of when I bite, I don't let go. So, I don't know. So, I at least give Jet credit that he looks right. But there's something about the way he acts that I can't put my finger on. It's just kind of weird. The closest thing I can say is he's a surprisingly angry guy. He's got a surprisingly short temper for who is usually the most level-headed member of the Bebop. Spike only usually beats him out just because he doesn't care that much about most situations. He's just going with the flow. Jet does at least have a foot in the door of any situation, but he's usually the one that has the best head on his shoulders. And that here he tends to lose his temper a lot. And it just feels kind of weird. It's hard for me to describe. I'm not sure what it is about it that feels off, but it is. And then we have Faye Valentine, probably the most different of all of them. Not because of her race, but just every other choice in her look. First of all, her wardrobe does not... It's still got that yellow thing underneath her jacket, but it's honestly not that visible, so she immediately lacks one of her defining visual identities. I'll give them credit that they did dye her hair purple. It's not like a very vibrant purple. It honestly looks like what normally happens when a real person dyes their hair purple. but it's better than Dragon Ball Evolution, where they gave Bulma one streak of blue hair, and they're like, yeah, that's enough. They'll get it. It's like, yeah, I mean, I get it, but you could have tried a little bit harder. Now, Faye's biggest difference is, again, the way she acts. She is real sweary. It's real. That's honestly kind of the best way to describe it. She's real fond of calling people dicks in a way that you wouldn't see. You know, Faye was definitely a sassy woman. She did not take shit from people, but she did it in a way that was more stuck up and full of herself rather than just being an asshole. And honestly, that being an asshole is almost all the character she has, because all of her other most of her other defining traits are gone. Her backstory is still there, that something happened to her. She was cryogenically frozen. She woke up, she was conned, and she was left with nothing. That's still there, but the first time we see her is when she's chasing down a bounty. So immediately I'm thinking like, okay, so she's a bounty hunter immediately, which means she's not the lazy person that she was. You know, in the original series, the first time we see her, she's been getting by on her own by lying, stealing, cheating people, but stuff that doesn't carry that much risk for her, because what episode? It was the movie. Yeah, it was the movie where she whines to herself like, I need to find a good job that pays a bunch of money without me having to do anything. And that line, I feel like, defines Faye. You know, she's doing a lot of this hard stuff because she has to, because it gives her money to spend at the horse tracks, and maybe, hopefully, pay off her debts at some point. But she clearly just wants to live an easy life and mooch off of everybody else. She's totally fine. She's the kind of woman who is totally fine letting Spike and Jet do all of the hard bounty hunting work and then taking the 60% of a 60-40 split. That's how she is. But nope, she's a bounty hunter right off the bat. She is apparently a very competent one, because there's an episode where her and Spike have a dick measuring contest about which bounties they've caught. And she has some apparently big names under her belt. She's got scars from it. She doesn't have a debt as far as we're aware, so I don't know why she's on this bounty hunting route, aside from, I guess, just taking out excess anger on people, because it doesn't seem like she, as far as we're aware, she doesn't really need the money. She still definitely has some amount of concern, longing for information on her past. You know, their adaptation of My Funny Valentine is all about her forcing Whitney to take her to where she's kept her information, all of her personal identification and everything. But it doesn't seem like she cares all that much. You know, it's when you see it done like this that you start to realize, like, okay, aside from just giving us her backstory, one of the purposes of My Funny Valentine in the original was to establish that this was a deeper side of Faye's character, that she is very broken up and upset about the fact that she doesn't know who she is or where she came from. And with this one, they say she cares, but she doesn't really act any differently about it. So at the end of that episode, when they have to do the speak like a child thing, where they get the tape, watch it, and see this young clip of Faye saying like, oh, I wonder where I'm going to be in 15 years. It's supposed to be this really impactful moment, but because we haven't seen any deeper side of Faye's character, when she watches the tape in silence and a tear rolls down her cheek, it doesn't feel earned. It doesn't feel like this is actually the same character. It just feels like, well, this is the way the character originally was, so we have to have her react in the same way. I feel like that's probably about as much as I can say about the core cast. It ranges from Jet's probably the closest to the original, to Faye being the furthest away, but none of them are accurate representations of the original characters. And they all get along too well, honestly. Like, there's a point after that dick measuring contest between Spike and Faye I was talking about, where Spike outright says, like, okay, I respect you, Faye. It's like, no. He wouldn't say that. Spike is the sort of person who, as soon as Faye comes on board, he immediately starts complaining like, I hate women with attitudes. Why is she here? That's why you get that scene in Jammin' with Edwards. Like, there are 3 things I hate. Dogs, kids, and women with attitudes. Why are all of them on my ship? No, he doesn't seem to care. He's totally fine with her. There's very little contention about the fact that Faye just wandered into their lives saying like, hey, I got myself into some shit. I need you guys to help me out, like not even giving them a choice. They don't really seem to care too much after that. And there's the fact that later on, Faye is all gung-ho about going in to help Spike when he's in trouble. Like, yes, in the original she would, but she would complain. It would take her a little bit of time. She would have to be prodded by Jet, and she'd complain about it the whole way. Then, that's about all I can say about the core cast, because I can't really talk about Edward. At least not yet. So we'll move on to the other 2 super prominent characters, starting with Vicious. Because yes, Vicious and the Syndicate plots are a very important thing to the storytelling of this series. You know how in the original there were very clear distinctions between, okay, this is an episode dealing with Spike's past, and these are all episodes. There are 5 of a 26 episode run. There are 5 episodes that are about Spike's past. 4 of them are 2-parters. So essentially there's 3 episodes about it. Every other time, Spike's past doesn't matter, he's just living life in the present. No, it is not at all like that here. I think every single episode has to show us what is Vicious doing right now. And something about that just really rubs me the wrong way. Like, it's a little hard for me to say, but it's something, the best way I can put it is, obviously, a big theme of Bebop is you can't run from your past. At some point, you have to face it and confront it. And I can see someone looking at that and saying like, yeah, okay, so Spike's past is constantly following him. It's always there. He can't escape it. But I think that's a bit of a naive way of going about it. I think the better way is the original series where no matter how far away from his past he thinks he gets and does things outside of it, because not everything a person does has to be connected to this one thing from their past. And no matter how far away Spike runs, his past will always eventually catch up to him, and he can't resist going back for it. Like, that was Jupiter Jazz. He goes over to this planet just because he hears something about like a code named Julia. It's like, okay, Julia's there. Same thing with Real Folk Blues. I admit, I forget right now. Yeah, and it's like, yeah, and he clearly gets really pissed off and starts working on his own in Battle of Fallen Angels when he hears that Mao has been assassinated. So clearly, it's always on his mind, but not everything about him has to revolve around it, and this show flattens his character by doing that. Well, that's enough about Spike. Vicious. I think out of everybody in the show, Vicious is probably the one character they get the most wrong. Aside from the fact that he has white hair, he's a mean guy, and he has a sword in the Syndicate. That's about all they got right. His hair's like wavy now instead of straight, so even he's not even wearing that awesome long coat that Vicious had. So even on an appearance level, they don't get it right. But holy shit, his character is wrong. And that's probably just a side product of them having to do so much with him. They have to develop his character more than it was in the anime, because in the anime, Vicious is a very simple character. He is cold, he is outwardly emotionless. He is only concerned with ascending and becoming more higher ranked in the Syndicate. And he wants, I don't even know if it's right to say revenge. He just wants to clean up part of his past with Spike. That's really all there is to him. This show makes him way too emotional. Like, even just like the actor's body acting, like he always has some emotion. He is angry, he is smug. There's a scene in an early, okay, well, I mean, that sort of another thing to get into, but just to try and keep things simple for the time being, there's a scene in an early episode where the syndicate tells him, the elders of the syndicate tell him, like, you must give your all to the syndicate, so shoot your wife in front of us. And he starts shaking his head and saying, no, please, anything but that. And like, no, Vicious is the kind of person who does not give a shit who he has to sacrifice in order to reach his own goals. It doesn't matter to him. He has absolutely no regard for anybody but his own ambitions. And you might be able to argue with the live action show, like, I mean, yeah, he doesn't care about his wife. He strictly has her for his own pleasure. So wanting her around it is a selfish thing, but it's the fact that it even involves another person. He's still conniving to take control of the syndicate, but he's doing it with other people. He's going to the other capos of the syndicate and being like, okay, let's cut a deal. Let's work together. And it's like, no, he has pawns, he has henchmen, but he is always the only person who matters. Everyone else in his goal is strictly there to, hey, at the time of my assassination, shoot some other guys and throw me my sword. Like, none of them, yes, he does end up betraying everybody in the Netflix version, and he does aim to take the throne for himself. But the fact that he even worked with other people, relied on other people fulfilling their roles. Like, no, he acts by himself. He is the only person he can trust. It's just amazing. I don't think there was a single moment where I looked at him like, yep, nope, that's Vicious. I did not think it for a second. And I can say the same thing about his wife, Julia. Yep, that's what they did with Julia in this version. They made him Vicious's wife. Now, they did keep their backstory similar. Julia was a woman that Spike and Vicious met in a bar once. Spike fell in love with her. Vicious, I guess, also did. Then Spike tried to run away with her. There was a big shootout. Spike was presumed dead. And that's all still there, but it's the fact that Vicious kept her close to him as his wife. She wasn't. Now they gave her some greater importance because she's like a singer on stage at a bar instead of the way more normal, they just saw her playing pool and Spike was enamored by her. Like, no, she has to make this entrance. First of all, she looks too prettied up. I'll say that. Like, early on looking at her, like this slender blonde woman with like eyeliner, I think, a big tattoo on her back. The first thing I thought was, why does she look like she came out of Sucker Punch? And then I see her performing, singing on stage, and I'm like, no, not Sucker Punch, Last Night in Soho. And either way, neither one of those is Julia. I think Faye said it best. She is ordinary. That beautiful, deadly kind of ordinary. And, I guess that's just a problem with Americanization of Hollywood. Everyone has to be pretty. They can't just have who is supposed to be an ordinary looking woman. Can't have that. But beyond that, she's not even acting like the same character. She's basically little more than a battered wife who is just crying, going to other people saying, please help me. She barely has any agency of her own. And I honestly could not even begin to tell you why either Vicious or Spike would have feelings for her. And obviously Vicious eventually, I think he may have started off that way. I think he may have started off having feelings for her, but lost it pretty quickly. Obviously Spike obsesses about her. But in the original show, I got it. Her and Spike just kind of worked together. She was just a normal woman, but one that would stand by Spike. One that the two of them had a simple, but it was a connection that worked. Here, I don't get it. I just don't. And then, finally, if there's one thing you know about this show after it came out, yeah, Edward is in it. And that actually did... It's a difficult one. So I'll start with the positives. First of all, the fact that we even got Ed is a pleasant surprise. We had gone in, they never said who Ed was going to be in casting. The intro, when it shows the 4 squares of the main characters, nope, there's just no Ed there now. It's just Spike, Jet, and Faye. Even though the director was saying, like, yes, of course, Ed was a part of the original cast, we're not leaving her out. We saw no proof that he was telling the truth. And, you'll see that sometimes with people working on something that they know the fans aren't going to like. They'll lie just so that they don't have to deal with the problem now. So either way, the fact that Ed is in the show is a pleasant surprise. Out of everybody, she looks the most accurate. Her hair is not just like a normal dyed color. It is still that bright orange. She still has the same outfit. The goggles look a little weird, but they're still there. And whoever the actress is, I'll give her credit that she was trying. I can tell she was trying. It just does not work. And that falls on a couple of reasons. First of all, the way they shot her one scene. She appears at the end of the final episode to be like a teaser for the next season, assuming there is another season. I should hope so, because if not, you held off on giving us Ed for nothing, the best character. Although at the same time, I hope there isn't another season, because even if they make a second season, I'm probably not going to. Maybe, I don't even know if I would watch it at this point. Even if they did something better in the second season, too little, too late. Anyway. But either way, the way they shot her one scene certainly did not help. It's got like a fisheye, wide-angle lens thing. I get that the idea is that they're trying to make Ed look weird, because she is, but they went too far and it just looks creepy. Second, Ed as a character is just the sort of thing that really works a lot better in an animation, in a cartoon, because she is a very cartoony character. You transplant that exact character into live action, like making no changes. She just looks even more out of place and bizarre, and not in the good way. And finally, again, no disrespect to the actress. I know she was doing it, but maybe this is just my English dub elitism coming through. You really don't realize how much Melissa Fahn carried that character. Melissa Fahn is a voice actress who just has what I feel is one of those instantly likable voices. Anytime she voices a character, I think half the reason I like that character is because of her voice. It's with Ed, it works with Neptune from Hyperdimension Neptunia, Rosita from Sakura Wars 5, she was the girl I got the ending with in that game because, that's Melissa Fahn's character. Of course I love her. Happens here, she really brought life and energy to all of Ed's weird mannerisms, and they felt believable because she had this good voice giving them life. Now, with whoever this new one is, it just sounds annoying, obnoxious, too over the top. It doesn't work, and if Ed's going to be a major part of a hypothetical season 2, it would be really sad to see my favorite character probably go to being one of my least favorite. But let's not end on a super negative note. Let's end on one more character I can point out. Ein. Much like the live-action Fullmetal Alchemist movie, which was also a live-action adaptation that stuck too close to the source material and ended up being total shit, much like that, the one positive I can say is, the dog was perfect. Fullmetal Alchemist had live-action Alexander, who was perfect. This big dog with long white fur, very excitable, very good dog. Same thing I can say with Ein. Still a Welsh Corgi, still a very cute dog. They kept him as being a super smart data dog. They never explained why, though I guess the original didn't really either. Honestly, it takes them a while for them to even explain that he is, even to sort of explain that he is supposed to be this super smart dog. And they don't really do that much with it, so whatever. But Ein is basically perfect. No complaints with him. So that's at least nice. 1 out of 5 of the Bebop crew is perfect. That's good. That's a good track record. 20%. I'll give him that. So I feel like that's most of the You know what? Actually, no. I got one more thing to give as a high-level critique of the series. The writing's just not that good, and I'm not talking about the way they portray characters, the fact that they don't want to do much new with the stories. I'm just talking about, like, the dialogue. It's not that good. Like, I mean, they're certainly trying to tell jokes, but they're not funny ones. And it has a weird problem, two problems. Probably more, but two that I can think of right now. First of all, the characters talk too much. It feels like they're afraid of there being any dead, empty air to let a moment breathe. Like someone has to be talking no matter what. It seems most evident with Spike. It's not like he was a quiet person in the original. He was not a man of few words, but he seemed like the sort of person who chose his words carefully. He did not need to constantly be replying to other people. He did not need to ramble on. It's too much. It just does not have the same feel. And that's also because, it lacks class. It lacks the class the original series had. It just feels too crude, too vulgar, too much swearing, too many sexual references. Like, it's more evident in the early episodes. I wonder if later writers did consciously decide to tone it down. But apparently, like, Spike fucks often. They like go to brothels in this one city because they're looking for a guy, and Spike knows the area. He goes in there and talks from experience. Like, what the? Like, why? Why is this a thing here? And it just feels more juvenile, and it's the exact same complaint I have with Netflix's Castlevania. Like, if you please, your show will be better if you just let it actually feel like an adult wrote it, please. So that's probably about all the high-level stuff I got. Now, I've got my list of episode-by-episode things to bring up. Now, I'm not going to read through everything because I got like 3 pages of notes across the entire thing. We're already almost 45 minutes in, so I'm not going to go into everything. We'll just bring up some highlights from each of the 10 episodes. All right, we start with episode 1. Now, each episode does have a new name. They all do have a new title, but I'm probably not the only one. It's easier to just identify every episode by this is the episode from the original they're aping. So episode 1 is Asteroid Blues once again. Now, it does start off differently. The original show started with that music box thing showing the rose falling into the puddle, a small glimpse of Spike's past. This one starts off, weirdly enough, I really wasn't expecting this, with a recreation of the movie's opening scene. And I made a joke, like watching the first scene of this movie, these criminals holding people hostage, and the lead guy is just talking about capitalism and corporations. And I made a joke in my notes of quoting Jet from the movie, great, another wannabe preacher with a gun. And then as I continued to watch it, I realized, like, no, wait a minute. This is actually exactly the movie's opening. Wannabe preacher with a gun holding employees hostage. They made it a casino now instead of a convenience store. Spike comes in wearing headphones, I guess, to throw them off. Jet breaks in through the ceiling. They take out most of them. A guy comes out of the bathroom, holds an old woman hostage. Like, it's all there. Aside from the fact that he uses this sci-fi weapon called a disruptor and blows a hole in the side of the space station casino, which did admittedly give me pause early on. I'm like, oh no, are they going to get the technology super wrong in this show? Because one of the things I really like about the original Bebop is what I call an analog future. Like, there's clearly high-tech stuff going on here. We got spaceships, we got terraforming, we got hyperspace gates. Like, there's clearly high-tech stuff here, but everything in it looks old. Like, if you're going to see a TV, it's either a hologram because that's a futuristic thing, or it'd be like a CRT. And you know what? Most of this show does stick to that sort of look. It's just every once in a while they do something that's too high-tech. And I'm glad it's not more common. The first episode is where we get all the introductions to the characters, so this was where I was taking notes just about the basic things I was noticing with them, like Jet just really, very in a casual conversation, talks about like, I don't even remember it exactly. It's not like a full explanation, but him just lamenting about like Spike bringing up like, you can get a new arm to replace his robotic one, and he brushes it off pretty quickly. And I'm thinking like that moment in Black Dog Serenade had a moment. You're just kind of throwing it in there. Okay. I pretty quickly forgot about it because of the revelation that in this universe, Jet was married. Jet has a kid. And that's the point where I realized, like, okay, so Ganymede elegies, obviously, no chance in hell it could happen because the details of Jet's relationship are completely different. And again, I feel like that takes something away from Jet's personality, I feel like he sort of acts like a father to the Bebop crew as a way to make up for the fact that he never was able to have a family with, admittedly, I can't remember the name of his girlfriend from the original, so, that's on me. And I guess you can say something similar here, like he did have a daughter, he did have a family, and now he's making up for that, but the fact that they are actually there does lose a little something. Honestly, it's just kind of weird that this is a change they made now. You lose some of the small moments with the episode. Like, you don't get that scene where Spike ambushes Asimov by wearing the poncho and sombrero. It was a funny little moment. You look ridiculous in that outfit. I love that scene. That's sadly not here anymore. And the episode ends, and it's just a boring-ass credit sequences. Like, black screen, just screens of white text, some random-ass song playing. I'm like, okay, you went through the effort to recreate the Tank opening. Where the fuck is the Real Folk Blues? And so that's most of the show. They do use it sometimes. There are a couple episodes where they have it as the credits, but it feels so random. Like, you're using the song. The episodes you're using it in aren't any more meaningful than the rest. Is there a fucking reason you're not using it as the credits of every episode? Even when you use it, is there a reason the credits themselves look like shit? There were some small things I could say, like some of the changes with the way they handled Asimov and his girlfriend. But I don't feel like they're major enough that I really need to raise a stink about it. I watched this like a week ago. I don't really remember it much anymore. So episode 2, real jump, I gotta say. It's now we're doing Cowboy Funk, which is one of the last episodes of the original series. And by Cowboy Funk, I mean the villain of it is Teddy Bomber. That's about all it has in common with the original, because you fucking adapted Cowboy Funk without Andy. What the hell is wrong with you? The best character. Yes, that's them doing something original. It's not good, but it's something at least different, but it's not good. If you're going to make a change, I would appreciate it if you did something good with it. That would be nice. It's not like Teddy Bomber is any more interesting in this version. He's mostly the same except for the fact that they cut out the joke that no one cares about him. Now it's just they wrote him boring and I don't care about him. The fact that no one cared about him in the original was a joke, and that made it endearing. Oh, and yeah, here's one little note I just have. It's something that only exists in the early episodes. The Bebop apparently has like an AI called Marvin. They talk to it like twice. It's like, hey, Marvin, do this. And I'm like, okay, the ship has an AI. I think you got confused, guys. You're supposed to be adapting Bebop, not Outlaw Star. If that was an intentional reference, that would be hilarious. But no, it's just some idea they had and quickly abandoned. Episode 3. Oh, no, wait. I forgot one thing about episode 2. The music about the show. We knew going into it, Yoko Kanno was going to be doing the soundtrack. So at least I had hope. Like, okay, music's at least going to be good. That's reassuring. So as I'm watching the first episode, I'm like waiting, like, okay, let me hear this new music. And then the first song we hear is What Planet Is This from the movie? That goes in the back, it backs the first action scene. And I'm thinking like, oh, okay, I know Yoko Kanno is doing new music, but they're also going to reuse music from the original, aside from Tank, obviously. And that I don't mind too much. Honestly, I think What Planet Is This was used Okay, maybe not better, but I love that song. I'm just happy to hear it again. Episode 2 does a weird thing with the music, though, where during the cold open, they start playing Tank. And you can tell that the cold open is starting to wrap up. So I'm like, okay, they're going to seamlessly segue into the opening while they're playing the song. No, they hard cut the song and then start it over for the opening that immediately follows. It's like, what kind of fucking sound editing are you guys using here? Like, what are you guys doing? And I guess I should probably mention the music. It is new. There is new music. It's good. It sounds like Bebop. I'm happy that there is. Apparently, the soundtrack is out there because watching the show put me in the mood to listen to normal Bebop music, and now YouTube's recommending, here's a complete rip of the new soundtracks. I'm like, okay. I'll give them credit that they did release a soundtrack of it, because fuck you, Castlevania. You released the first season soundtrack, which no one gives a shit about, but you haven't done anything past that. I don't even like your show. I just want your remix of Bloody Tears, for God's sake. Alright, so anyway, episode 3, Stray Dog Strut. This episode, I will also give credit that they're doing something original with it, in that it's not just Stray Dog Strut. They also decided to mix it with Jingle All the Way. The crossover we all knew we needed, just had to have, because there's a whole subplot of the episode of Jet's daughter's birthday is coming up, so he's trying to buy her this really popular toy. And aside from the fact that it's the B plot, so it doesn't get that much focus, it is pretty much Jingle All the Way. It's an odd choice, if not an inspired one. It at least made me laugh. I'll give it credit for that. They still do some weird stuff. They do a lot of weird stuff with this episode now that I'm looking at it. The fact that they kept around the idea that Abdul Hakim is hiding his identity. And the original show had it nice and simple. He got plastic surgery. I'm like, okay, that's all you have to say. I get it. It's fine. This one introduces a new piece of tech called a face scrambler, where it's like your face is connected to some server or something, and it projects a hologram of a new person over you. I don't really get it. And it just confuses me even more than the simple explanation that they just felt the need to change. We see a little bit of the syndicate operations, where like what they're doing to package their red-eye drugs, and I give them points for weirdness. It's the only time they really do get this weird. It's a bunch of naked people in a room packing stuff with drugs, and they all have their eyes sewn shut like this is Oddworld. So I give them credit for the weirdness, and I also give them credit that they managed to replicate that feeling of watching Jupiter Jazz from the original. It's just like, oh, there's just suddenly naked tits now. I hope no one walks by the room while I'm watching this. I somehow managed to keep getting lucky about that. I watch everything on the biggest, most central TV in the house, and somehow no one ever questions what the hell I'm watching. I've done it with this show and the original Bebop so many times. Kill la Kill I've watched in there a couple times. End of Evangelion. I did not know there were going to be that many nipples in that movie. I'm so glad no one... The only time I think anyone ever noticed, either of my parents noticed, like, what the hell are you watching? What's the last episode of Excel Saga? And it, honestly, considering the scene my dad walked in, it could have been worse. It could have been much worse. So this is the first episode where they play Real Folk Blues during the credits. There was a moment where I thought, like, okay, hey, someone on this show cares. When they get Ein, they're looking over his collar to see what his name is. And I noticed for a brief moment before they flip the collar tag over to see his name is Ein, the front has a Cheerius Medical tag on it, which was the medical company from the movie. And I'm like, okay, they didn't bring attention to it. They're just using that name to say, like, that's the place that engineered Ein. I'm like, okay, someone working on this show watched the original and just wanted to throw in a cute little reference. It's kind of like most of the positives that I have for Mega Man Fully Charged. It's like, okay, that was a cute little reference to the source material. I liked it. They do something weird with it later, I'll get to, but for a moment I was happy. Yeah, and one more weird thing that was odd to me, they make a point that in this universe, dogs are apparently very rare, very expensive, apparently very heavily taxed, and it really never impacts anything. And I don't get it, because the original made it a specific point to say, if no one knew Aiden was a data dog, apparently a Welsh Corgi is worth 3 wulongs. But no, he's apparently, just the fact that he is a dog is already rare and impressive. The fact that he's a data dog is just weird on top of that. Okay, whatever. Abdul Hakim didn't even know that he was rare. He's just kidnapping dogs because they give him a backstory where his family were servants to a bunch of rich people on Earth. When the hyperspace gate exploded, they all took their dogs instead of their servants, and now he's taking revenge on the rich people by taking the thing they love the most. And I just realized they mentioned the hyperspace gate explosion. They mentioned that Earth's a shithole, twice. They never actually explain what the hell it is. Why are we terraforming other planets? What's going on? That'd be a nice little thing to tell us. Alright, so episode 4, Gateway Shuffle. Weird choice. Most of the other episodes they chose to adapt, I get it. Asteroid Blues is there because it's an introduction to the series. You gotta have Stray Dog Strut because you have to introduce Ein. You gotta have a lot of these other episodes just because they're important, or they are classic episodes. Gateway Shuffle is one of the weirder episodes of the original series. It's not one of the better ones. Honestly, the most enjoyment I get out of it is because the idea of an evil old woman who puts on a facade of being nice with her bumbling children just reminds me of Futurama. That's kind of funny to me. But other than that, this was a weird choice of an episode to adapt. But to give them, I understand I'm actually saying to give them credit a lot. So I guess you can say the show does do plenty of things, but the fact that I have to preface every single one of them with to give them credit means that they are working from a very low baseline. So anytime they do something at least a little bit noteworthy, I have to specifically point it out and say it's the exception rather than the norm. To give them credit, it's actually a little bit more believable, their plan in this version. In the original, they were developing a retrovirus, a genetic devolution thing that devolves humans and only humans into monkeys in order to stop them from destroying the environment. This one, they use the spores that are used for terraforming to turn people into trees. And that makes more sense. It's not bringing up some weird science thing that isn't ever a thing anywhere else in the series. They say these are the spores used for terraforming. I'm like, okay, that's a concept that I know exists in this universe. Genetic manipulation is not. So I give them credit that they actually made it work a little bit better in this version. And that at the very least, they show one scene in detail of a guy getting turned into a tree. It's fucking disgusting. I liked it. Sometimes I just like seeing some disgusting gore and body horror. And this one scene, at the very least, did give me that. Though it does lose points because the ending is really boring. They don't have that hyperspace gate climax where Spike and Faye are tensely chasing the missile through the hyperspace gate, and they have to get out before it can close and lock them all into hyperspace. Which means you also do lose out on that tiny little bit of foreshadowing where Faye doesn't understand the mechanics of a hyperspace gate because she was born and raised before they existed. There's just a tiny little detail. I appreciated it. Episode 5, Black Dog Serenade. None of my notes are about the A-plot, about Jet and his old partner hunting down Uday Taxum. It's just all other stuff. First of all, this episode does at the very least establish that Andy exists in this universe. We don't know anything about him, but the show Big Shot has a list of cowboys, and Andy is on that list. And despite the fact that they make points to say a lot of these cowboys are dying during the course of the episode hunting down bounties, Andy's still in it. There's a chance he can come back. Let's hope so. Yeah, I made a point that this is the episode where Spike and Faye get along way too well. It just doesn't work. There's one weird shot where it's like a camera, like a GoPro mounted on top of a fridge door. So like follows the door as Spike opens it to get something out and then follows it back. It's one of the weirdest shots I've seen. Like, yeah, classic camera on top of a fridge door shot. You see in everything. What the fuck am I looking at? I don't even notice this stuff too often. I feel like first time I ever noticed weird camera angles was Godzilla vs. Kong earlier this year. Like, this giant monster movie has some shots that look like they were shot on a GoPro. And now I'm seeing it here too. I don't know if I'm getting more aware or if 2021 is just a real bad year for cinematography. But yeah, the last note I have on the episode is standards are lowering, but not a bad episode, honestly. It was an episode I really liked in the original series because it felt so grounded and so adult. And this one, it doesn't do it as well. You know, they also really remove the badass elements of Udai because he's not like some legendary, dangerous hitman from the Syndicate. He's just a gopher or something from the Syndicate. That's the only thing Jet cares about capturing him is tell me who the dirty cop is. Like, Udai himself barely matters. And of course, if you've seen the original episode, you know exactly how it's going to end. So there's no mystery to it. Episode 6 is Brain Scratch. This is the first episode where they make a point that Edward exists. It's just all of a sudden wow, man, even I'm getting confused. All of a sudden they just make it a point to say, like, yep, she's in contact with the Bebop crew. She gives them information on bounties. It's like, okay, how did they meet? How do they know each other? You're going to explain that? Or like, no, Edward's just, I guess, always been here, first being mentioned in the 6th out of 10 episodes. Okay, then. This is definitely, it's another, I mentioned this episode earlier as it has the same high level plot, but it does make a lot of changes with how the minutia of how it goes. And by that, I mean, the episode is pretty much Spike goes to Scratch's headquarters. They trick him into getting into the chair to digitize his brain. And most of the episode is just seeing the way his brain is processing this digitization, letting go of his physical desires, sort of thing. And it looks kind of nice. They give at least a little bit of visual flair to it. Like, the first time Spike goes through the simulation, everything looks perfectly realistic, but every time he keeps redoing it and it's like breaking down, people in the back, I mean, they make a point of showing like people in the background glitching out, but you see the sky starts looking unrealistic. Everyone except Spike has this painted filter over them. It honestly works kind of well. What doesn't work so well is the fact that they now explain that Londes is just a rogue AI. And he's digitizing people because I don't fucking know. You remember how the original show, Londes' true identity was a kid who was tragically put into a coma? So the idea is he's convincing other people to let go of their physical bodies and exist solely in the net to be company for him because that's the life he's forced to live. It was a very tragic, very emotional scene. It's one of the few scenes in the series that absolutely chokes me up every time I watch it. And nope, it's just some rogue AI now. Really, really sucks. And because of these changes, it loses the two best things from the original episode. First of all, it does not include, because it's just Spike going into the simulation before anyone else can find him, we lose the scene of Ein hacking the server perfectly. We lose that, so that's one. There's like one smart moment with Ein, so we lose his best moment. And even worse, the absolute biggest sin the series could have committed if they were going to adapt Brain Scratch. Because this episode takes place before they actually have Ed physically with them, we miss out on the Papa, my Papa. That is, despite the fact that I said it's one of the saddest episodes, that scene cracks me up. I love that joke so much. Jet's telling this super sad sob story, and Ed the entire time is just hugging him, saying, Papa. Oh, I can't help but laugh. But they replaced it with something else, though. Certainly. Faye's a lesbian now. I mean, at the very least, they say that this episode is her first lesbian experience, but I saw that and I was like, yep, you did it. You finally completed the trifecta of Americanization changes. We have Jet being made black. We have several characters now being made women, like Whitney Haggis Matsumoto's a woman now. There was definitely at least someone else that it was. Well, I can't remember him now. At the very least, we have a character that was made black. We have a character that was made a woman, and now we have a character that's made LGBT. Congratulations, you completed the trifecta, guys. I'm sure you're so happy about fulfilling this corporate requirement. You guys should pat yourself on the back. Good work. It feels so shitty. Much like how the end of the episode starts using Space Lion, which is another fantastic song, and then they cut it off just to play the real folk blues during the credits. It's like, okay, first of all, you should be saving Space Lion for a real meaningful moment, and you should let the song play in full, but that would require having that long, quiet moment of the pan up to the stars, and as I said earlier, the show is not a fan of long, quiet moments. Though at the very least, the text at the end of the episode, they do still do the standard "See You Space Cowboy" at the end of each episode. They mix it up a bit more often now, but they don't do anything original. Because of the whole Spike going through the simulation and digitization thing, this episode they use the "Are You Living in the Real World" from the movie, and you know what? Fair enough. I can take that. Episode 7. This one is the My Funny Valentine one. My first note of the episode is episode 7 out of 10 of a Cowboy Bebop adaptation. This is the first time we ever see Spike smoking a cigarette. Good work, guys. Took you this long to get to one of his defining visual characteristics, because obviously opinions on cigarettes have changed over the years. I feel like probably not too much between 98 and now, but clearly the reason characters smoked so much was because it was playing on that very old school, cool kind of thing, like this 50s, 60s look of, yeah, smoking cigarettes is cool. And maybe that idea has just been lost in the 20 years since, but they just don't do it too much, and it feels like since this is the only time we see him smoke, it feels like they only do it out of obligation now. Yep, Faye has the same backstory, but like I said, she's just angry about it. She's just yelling people calling them dicks instead of actually appearing sad about it. Mentioned before, they make a point, I don't know a point, but whatever, something I found pretty funny. They, during Vicious's subplot, throughout the entire show, they've been cutting to this idea of Vicious working to take over the syndicate. And he's working with two of the other heads, one of them Mao, one of them a new character named Santiago. And their plan is basically you guys accuse me of planning a coup against the syndicate, which he was not so subtle about it in the original. He didn't say like, all right, I'm going to double cross people. It's just, nope, I'm planning a coup. I'm just going to straightforward do it. Man of action, whatever. And the exact words he says are, was that even why they did it? I cannot remember. God's sakes. I'm just going to keep pretending that this is the context in which they said it. But, I don't even remember. Either way, if I'm going to backpedal here, because I don't know. Someone says the phrase, swear a death note on me. And the fact that they specifically use the phrase Death Note, I'm like, good work, guys. Thank you for reminding me of your other shitty anime adaptation. Good work. I bet you're so proud of that, of reminding me of something else bad to take my mind off of this bad. Okay. This episode did have the one scene in the show that I did think was pretty funny. And I'm like, okay, that's new. It's funny. I like it. Jet's thing in the episode that he's all worried about is his daughter's in a recital, in a play, and he doesn't want to be dealing with this shit. He just wants to be in a place where he can watch appear as a hologram, because that's a tech in this universe, whatever. They use it often enough that I feel I can work with it. So either way, like right as the recital's about to start, he's like, okay, I understand we're in the middle of something here, but I'm just going to go take this Spike, you deal with whatever thing comes up next. So it's this shot inside the building. They cut between Jet, like as a hologram in the audience watching his daughter, and then cut back to what it's actually like for him where he physically is. So he's just inside the building, like laughing, clapping along. And in the background, through the window, you see Spike fighting a bunch of guys. You don't hear it, because he's outside, and there's like there's a window between them. But you just see him fighting. And the juxtaposition of that I thought was really funny, because there's no build up to the fight. It's just Spike like hanging out in the plaza, knowing that he's going to have to deal with whatever's coming up on his own. And the next time we see him, he's already fighting 5 dudes. They ruin the joke slightly by continuously cutting back to this. And I'm like, okay, 1 or 2 times would have been enough. Or if you were going to keep cutting back, what's happening in the background should be getting more ridiculous. But it was a funny idea. I'll give him that. Okay. That. And one other thing funny about this episode, I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional, but you remember the original Speak Like a Child. The one tie Faye had to her past was she got a tape in the mail. Spike and Jet have to go to a museum. They pick up a VCR and then find out that it's a beta tape. I guess that joke would have been lost on a modern audience, because I guess kids don't even know what beta is nowadays. Like maybe back in the 90s, people basically knew like barely what beta was. And they're like, okay, it's funny because it's this weird format. They just make it a VHS tape now. And I guess like, okay, in the 20 years since then, VHS has just become this weird, outdated format. That's kind of funny. I kind of wish that they had instead doubled down in the other direction and made it an even weirder video format. Like, Faye got her this home movie back on CED. If they did that, I would have laughed my ass off and given the show a 10 out of 10. At least that scene. It would have been amazing. But yeah, they just do the ending to Speak Like a Child here. They don't have the whole having to go find a VCR because it's some weird old piece of tech that no one cares about. Like, no, Jet just has one on the ship now, I guess. He has a TV for it as well. I don't know. They just do the tape. It's exactly the same as the original episode. Like, word for word, shot for shot, almost. Exactly the same as the original. It's like, okay. See, but the difference was in the original, I cared more about how Faye reacted to it. All right, episode 8, Piero Le Fou. They make the common mistake of thinking that the character's name is Piero Le Fou, because that's the name of the episode. His name is Mad Piero. Hello, this is Liam from the future coming in to correct myself. His original name was not Mad Piero, it was Tong Poo, you fucking Gamjo. It's like, all right. Cowboy Bebop at his computer moment right there. They also, they change it so, like, he's also an experiment of Cheerius Medical. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, they are actually bringing Cheerius into the plot. Now you're overdoing your cute little reference, guys. But this is the closest we get to an explanation about why Ein is special. And because of that, they changed his fear from cats to dogs because they were also experimenting on dogs in the same place. It's a tiny change because of the way they were handling it. It was a necessary one, fine. I don't mind that. What I do mind is the fact that he is now a hired assassin by Vicious in order to find Spike. You know what? I didn't bring that up. They have it now where Spike is a fake identity that he used after he left the Syndicate, which that might have been the case. No, it was not the case in the original because Julia called him Spike. Never mind. Yeah, everyone called him Spike, so I guess not. But either way, in this one, Spike's a new identity he assumed after he left the Syndicate, and when he was in the Syndicate, he was known as Fearless. And I guess they're trying to justify like why his name would be Vicious, like it's a code name. I think it's kind of funnier to think that, yeah, his name is just Vicious. Like, it doesn't really make sense, but it fits the character, so whatever. Let's see here. They, of course, have to copy the exact same shot from the original of Spike getting MVC juggle comboed by Mad Perot, and it's just the shadows on the wall. First of all, they don't do it as long. It's not as many hits, so it's not as good of a combo. And that's probably because it really looks bad. It's supposed to be these weird physics that works better in a cartoon. In live action, it just looks awkward. I don't even remember what the hell he was talking about, but I made a note that Spike has his own quote about, like, he has layers like some kind of food. And I'm like, you're fucking referencing Shrek now? What the hell is going on here? Because they were both created in the same lab, Perot has the ability to remotely control Ed and project himself as a hologram using Ed's eyes as projectors. It's the only time it happens. It's really fucking weird, and I thought Ein being a data dog. Did I say Ed earlier? I meant Ein. I thought Ein being a data dog just meant he was really intelligent, not that he had like cybernetic implants or something. Also, I think they were saying something that like Ein is intelligent because they implanted Perot's memories into him or something. I don't even know what the fuck they were talking about. He talks a little too much. I feel, again, he works a little bit better as just a maniacal laughter. Again, he talked a little bit in the original, but too much here now. They have to spell it out a little too much that like the first time after Spike fights him and sees guns doesn't work, as he's preparing for the next fight, he spells out like his force field blocks bullets and projectiles, but it won't stop a knife because it's too slow. And I'm like, okay, I understand they didn't explain that in the original. It might have confused some people, but I got that. If you're going to go out of your way to explain everything, then why the fuck did you not explain at the end? Spike stabs him in the leg. He starts crying and calling out for mommy. It's like, okay, you didn't explain why that happened. It was, again, plenty simple in the original. All this time spent experimenting on this guy has regressed him to a mental state. He regressed him to the mental state of a child. And Jet says like there's nothing more cruel and innocent than a child. Made perfect sense. They just didn't bother to explain it now. Something that I think would be more confusing because you don't explain the force field fine, but it's a little confusing in the original. But at some point I got it. Like, okay, that's a tech that you would see in some other sci-fi thing. I understand that. This mental regression thing is a bit more specific. You have to explain that. This is where Vicious's coup happens. He kills the elders. One of them is his dad. I believe I've already said everything that they important about it. They really don't do anything important with it. They could have cut it. Wouldn't have changed anything. Episode 9. This one is the only time I can't say this is just an adaptation of another episode because it's actually different a little bit. It's a full flashback episode explaining in detail Spike, Vicious, and Julia's backstory. Now, this is the sort of thing that would make a lot of people angry because Shinichiro Watanabe, original director, said that he was of the opinion that less was more regarding their backstory. It's why he changed the original concept for the movie was to basically go over the same stuff. But he decided, nah, less is more, and just made it an original story. I understand that, and I can agree with that, but I always thought that Spike's backstory in the Syndicate was a little too vague. I felt like there were some details I was never totally sure on, and I would have liked a bit more detail. So having this here is honestly not too bad. I can take it. They don't do it well, but I can at least respect the fact that they're doing it. But you wouldn't guess that from the very beginning of the episode. It's like the first line of the episode is Spike and Vicious talking about shaving their balls. And I'm like, okay. I was honestly, half of me was expecting them to like turn to the camera and start advertising Manscaped. If they did that, I would have to give them points again for weirdness. But no, it's just like, okay, this is not a conversation that they ever would have had in the original. It's not a conversation I want to think about them having. And my life is worse now hearing it. So that's that. The text at the end of the episode is, "You're going to carry that weight," which you're really robbing the final episode of that one, guys. Whenever you finally do adapt Real Folk Blues, you're going to be real stuck without that one. That's a good one. You already used it. You wasted it. Good work. Not as bad as episode 10 did, Ballad of Fallen Angels. Faye outright says at some point during this episode when she's arguing with Jet about whether or not they should go, whether they should help Spike because the syndicate's hunting him down. Which, first of all, I feel like Jet would be a little bit more on board with helping him rather than Faye. But they swapped it around because I'll get into that in a second. Either way, Faye basically says something like, if you're going to abandon him, then I won't be a part of that. Her exact words are, I'm not going to carry that weight. And I audibly just went, boo. I have not booed like that since Dragon Ball Evolution with the DBE, catchy line. It was really shitty and really overt in a way that honestly the series usually isn't. It was pretty bad. Anyway, so the way they changed Spike and Jet's relationship is Jet doesn't know that Spike was part of the syndicate. And Spike won't tell him because, like, yeah, Jet's an ex-cop. He's going to hate me. He'll kill me if he knows. And it doesn't really matter until his past catches up with him. And I liked the idea in the original that they both, maybe they didn't know all the details of each other because they didn't feel like asking about it because they knew the other wouldn't want to talk about it. But they both knew the general idea of what each other's past was because they were partners. They trusted each other. Now, no, it's just Spike's keeping secrets because Jet would hate him for it, and it robs them of a bit of their chemistry and connection. I complimented the music before. I felt like the new music, they didn't always use the old music in the best places, but usually it was fine, and the new music all still had that bebop sound. This episode was the one exception. They have this climax in the church. All the syndicate guys are there. Faye shows up to help by shooting them all down, shooting a bunch of them down with her ship. The music they play, though, is some weird shenanigans-y music. I'm like, what the fuck am I listening to? This is a tense situation. Jet and his daughter were about to get shot. Faye's saving their lives. What music are you playing here, guys? What is going on? Like, this is the kind of song that would fit better in an Edward episode. Oh, actually, I didn't write this down, but that comment brought a memory back to me. Episode 3, when they're going to the brothels to look for Abdul Hakim, the music they're playing is Chicken Bone, and I was like, that's a really weird and uncomfortable choice, using a song that I associate with the underage Ed to score scenes where they're going to brothels and like an S&M club. Like, what? That's just a weird... It's too shenanigans-y a song for this kind of thing. Weird choice. And then they immediately bring themselves back with the music by playing Rain. But two things on it. First of all, I think it's kind of interesting they played the Steve Conti version of it instead of the Mai Yamane one, because that's the one they played in the original series. Steve Conti recorded a version that wasn't getting used, and then they used it in this one. It's like, all right, you know what? Given that version of the song some exposure, I'm cool with that. But it's weird because the way the episode progresses, it's Spike and Jet get captured by the syndicate because they've captured Jet's daughter in exchange for Spike. They get captured, beaten, wake up in the church. Faye helps them escape. They get Jet and his daughter out. And then Spike walks back in, and that's when they start playing Rain. It's just kind of weird that they're using it. Like, he walked out of the building and then walks back in, and now it's the big moment. It was just a little bit weird. They did still have to finish this episode with the green bird moment where Spike falls out the window, slow motion. It shows flashbacks, but it's the one time they actually try and do a slow, quiet moment, but it doesn't look good, and they don't let it linger as long as the original series did. And it also loses a little bit of impact, I think, physically, like literally, because Spike lands and he just walks it off. He's not horribly injured like he is in the original, so you don't get the "you sing off key" moment. I don't know how the fuck I understand Spike is a surprisingly difficult man to kill, but I don't think he just lands out of a drop that they show it's a super long, an even longer drop than it was in the original. And no, he just walks it off, whatever. Kind of weird. And here's the big change that they make towards the end of the 10th episode. Julia is also there. She has apparently decided that she is tired of being Vicious's bitch. She's tired of getting beaten by him because that's all her character is now. She's tired of being afraid. She's tired of... that's basically it, tired of being afraid. So she takes the opportunity to shoot Vicious and say that nothing is standing in the way between her, Spike, and being heads of the syndicate because the elders have all been killed. And this was the moment where I realized, like, did you just kill Vicious in what's the adaptation of the 5th episode? Is Julia going to be the villain now? And Vicious isn't dead. Julia keeps him chained up in a room and saying no, syndicate rules say that no one is allowed to see the elders, so as your wife, I will speak on your behalf. And she just keeps him locked up, and she's going to rule the syndicate now. And I'm like, and I was probably just like that for a while, because it's not at all Julia. It's kind of a betrayal to the original series, but it's definitely different and taking things in a drastically different direction. Even if it's really bad, I reluctantly have to give them props for that. It's weird. I can't hate him for that, I guess. I can hate him for a lot, but not for that, I suppose. So the episode ends. We get our one scene with Ed. I already completely dissected it earlier. The episode ends, and before the credits even have a chance to roll, as it's on that final text, which is the "See you, cowgirl, someday, somewhere." Again, you've wasted that line if you're ever going to adapt Hard Luck Woman. But before the credits can even roll, Netflix is quick to recommend, hey, do you want to watch the original Cowboy Bebop now? And yes. Yes, I would, because the Cowboy Bebop you guys have made is garbage. I had the feeling it was probably going to be garbage from the moment you announced it. And now that I forced myself to sit through all 10 episodes of it, I can confirm that my initial suspicions were correct. You did something that wasn't completely irredeemable, but it loses all its value because the original series does exactly what you're doing, but better. Now that they've set up something fucking weird with Julia, if they do make a second season, which it's Netflix, even if their shows are terrible, they make multiple seasons of them. It could happen. I'm conflicted because they absolutely have the potential now to go into very different directions. I have the feeling they won't because, hey, we just got Ed. Now we can get started on adapting Ed episodes. We can do Jammin' with Edward. We can do Mushroom Samba. The last episode hinted at Faye trying to get started on Hard Luck Woman. Maybe we can get to that. There's still plenty of episodes they can adapt, but please, you do something new. Maybe you can at least get something that would at least be kind of weird. And at the very least, if you're going to be shit, now you can go all the way, Dragon Ball Evolution style, and just be really shit. I'd be more willing to watch that, but I'm not even sure I'd give it the time of day at this point. If they make another season, I can see myself totally skipping it, because even if you do something weird with it now, too little too late. And you know what? I'm glad that it seems like everybody else agrees with me. I haven't seen too many opinions on it on the show so far. I've just seen people memeing the Ed scene and how uncomfortable and awkward it looks. I have seen some funny things, like someone just posted it, that wide angle lens screen cap of it, and it just says American Sega Saturn commercials be like. That was pretty funny. I've seen some comments saying like, yep, nope, this is garbage. I've seen a thumbnail of a review of the full series that just says bad, or maybe it was like really bad. So it seems like everybody else hates the show too. And you know what? After several Netflix shows that I'm like, yeah, no, I didn't like that, but everybody else seems to love, Daredevil and Castlevania. It's nice to see something on Netflix that I can acknowledge as shit and everybody else agrees with me is shit. That's nice. And it makes me really curious what the hell they're going to be doing now that they have already committed to doing live-action One Piece and live-action Yu Yu Hakusho. A part of me feels like I shouldn't be surprised if they just canceled them at this point, because they've done their experiment and it turned out like trash. But I think they're a little too far in. They've announced the cast for One Piece. They've given a release date of 2 years from now for Yu Yu Hakusho. I don't know what's taking them so long. I feel like you can start from concept to finish show in that time. You announced this like a year ago. I don't know what the hell's going on with that one, but One Piece I can guarantee you I'm not going to watch because I don't care about One Piece. Yu Yu Hakusho is probably also going to be bad. It's also a weird choice because it's not a super popular show as far as I'm aware. But it's at least want to have a slight connection to, so probably not though. I think in 2 years I'll be smart enough not to watch this kind of garbage. And Netflix, if you're listening, please just keep doing anime what you did with Evangelion. I understand a lot of people didn't like that either, but you at least you didn't try to remake Evangelion. You just kept the original and just made a new dub for it and sub, probably because Kara forced you to. You brought back a classic, critically acclaimed, loved series that was in licensing hell outside Japan for a long time. And honestly, I like the new dub. You did something good with it. Just keep doing stuff like that. Rescue shows that need it. Don't try and remake what's not broken. But that's probably too much to ask for.